All right, so what we're going to discuss first is the idea of the number I. Okay, so, and then we'll come back to doing some of these problems. I think on your homework, let me double check. You have 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 problems total. Okay, these look like they're going to be hard. These are like super easies. Don't worry about those. These are the ones that are a little more challenging. Okay, so let's talk about the number I. All right, so I is defined as the square root of a negative 1. So anytime you see a negative inside of a square root, automatically think of it as I. So I'll give you some examples. If I were to write like the square root of negative 22, you should automatically write I square root of 22. Notice how the negative is no longer there, right? Because the I says, hey, there was a negative 1 inside of there. So I'm going to take it out. So we'll call it I. Now, there could be I'll do just one more of these, like negative 10 inside. You're going to write I radical 10. So that's pretty easy, right? Not too bad. Sometimes you may have to simplify some of these square roots, just so you're aware. So if I were to write like negative 8 inside, then we want to write, I square root of 8. But square root of 8, even though it doesn't have a nice square root, you can break it down, right? Give me two numbers that multiply to 8, one of which has a nice square root to it. 4 and what? 2. Now 2 doesn't have a nice square root, but what's the square root of 4? 2. So look, I'm going to get this 4 and I'm going to take it out and put a 2 there. So that's going to be a 2I radical 2. Okay, so when you guys are doing this, maybe you may have to simplify a little further. Maybe you don't. It just kind of depends on the problem itself. Okay, so, but remember, the number I is the square root of negative 1. Now, by definition, if I squared I, okay, if I squared I, so what happened if I said, okay, what's I squared? Well, that's the square root of negative 1 squared. Well, doesn't a square get rid of a square root? It cancels it, right? So this just becomes negative 1. And the same thing can be done with I cubed and I to the 4th. So what I want to show you guys are just the three main definitions for I that we use. All right, so I'm just going to show you the three main definitions. So I is the square root of negative 1. I squared is negative 1. So if you ever see an I squared, you can automatically change it to negative 1. If you see an I cubed, that's a negative square root of negative 1. Okay, which I really am not a big fan of. And then I to the 4th, that's a positive 1. So make sure you guys know these. I'm going to put a box around these things. Okay, make sure you guys know these 4 by memory. They're not hard to memorize. Maybe the cubed one might be a little tougher, but they're not too hard to memorize, those 4. Okay, those are the most common I powers you're going to see. Okay, so in order to do the beginning page of your homework, this is all you need to know how to do, just those powers. So let me show you what we're going to do. So let's go to your homework really quick. All right, let's look at, I don't want to do number 1. That one seems to be kind of easier. Let's do number 2, which might be a little bit tougher. Okay, for number 1, I squared, you just have to square, 8I squared, you just have to square 8I. All right, so you multiply 8I times 8I, you'll get your answer. But let's look at question number 2. Okay, 4I times negative 7I. Now, multiply the numbers first, and then you multiply the letters I second, okay? So if you multiply 4 times negative 7, what do you get? Anybody? Negative 28, thank you. And then what's I times I? Think of it like x times x. What would you have gotten? X times x is x squared, right? So what's I times I? I squared. Thank you. Now, what's the definition of I squared? Say it again. Negative 1. So this is negative 28 times negative 1. Okay, and what's negative 28 times a negative 1? Positive 28, right? So there you go. There's my answer for that one. Remember, this is your homework. We are going through your homework problems. I like to do some of the problems for you guys so you don't have to worry about doing so many, right? So let's check out number 4. Okay, let's check out number 4. The very first thing you're going to have to do for number 4 is you're going to have to distribute these negatives in, okay? So that's what I'm going to do right now. Let me rewrite this problem. So I get 8i plus 6 minus 6i minus 6i. And then I'm going to combine things that are like, okay? So here are some like terms. 8i, negative 6i, negative 6i. So if I do 8i minus 6i, I get 2i plus 6 minus 6i. Now I can still combine 2i minus 6i. What's 2i minus 6i? I think I'm hearing you say it. Negative 4i. Thank you. Plus 6. All right. Now, can I combine, like when there's a number that says like 2x plus 5, can I combine 2x plus 5? No, they're not like terms. Same rule applies to this. I can't combine a negative 4i with a positive 6 unless it has the letter I. So that means I'm done. So which one is the correct answer, A, B, C, or D? D, right? It doesn't look the same, but if you flip them, it's identical, right? So it's going to be D. All right, because this is also the same as 6 minus 4i. It's the same thing. So, I mean, does this seem like terribly difficult? It's kind of like simplifying expressions that you guys have done before, just that we're using imaginary numbers. Okay, so let's look at something like number 6. Okay, number 6. Now you see how it's a parenthesis times a parenthesis, right? Binomial times binomial. So what do you normally do when you have a binomial times a binomial? What is it called? It starts with the letter F or with the letter D. Yeah, distribute, right? Or some people like calling it FOIL, right? So here we go. We're going to multiply 7 times 8, 7 times 4i. So let's go ahead and do that. All right, so if we multiply 7 times 8, we get 56. 7 times a positive 4i is a positive 28i. And now let's multiply negative I times 8 and negative I times 4i. Right? So let's see. Negative I times 8 is negative 8i. And negative I times a positive 4i is a negative 4i. Actually, no. What did I mess up on at the end? It should be an I squared, correct. Yeah. When I looked at it, I'm like, nope, whoops, messed up. There should be an I squared there. Okay. Now, what is I squared again? Negative 1, right? I squared is negative 1, so don't forget about that. Right now we're going to change it. So here we go, 56. I can combine these two terms right here, okay? So I'm going to put them together. So 56, 28 minus 8 is 20. Minus 4i squared. I squared would be negative 1. So that minus 4 is actually a plus 4, right? So let's write 56 plus 20i plus 4. Now I can combine my 56 and my 4. So that gives me 60. So that's 60 plus 20i. Which option is that? A, thank you. So there you go. All right. So do you guys see, like, it's basically the stuff you've done before, just with a letter I that may actually change to a -1 when you multiply stuff out, right? It may kind of change the way it looks. Now let me just look at the rest of these problems here. Do me a favor, because 6 and 8 are basically the same. It's just some extra numbers there. Number 7 is just distributing numbers and adding and subtracting. Not a big deal. Do number 9 for me, okay? And then right now I'll come back and do this. But remember, I want to have you guys remember that one thing here. If it says -3 minus I quantity squared, that means that there's two of those. That means that this looks like this. So that's what you're going to multiply, okay? So let me zoom into it. I'm going to give you a little bit of time to do it, and then we'll check the answers, okay? All right, so let's check to see what the answer is going to be, okay? So we're going to multiply those two first. So here we go. -3 times a -3, that's a +9, right? Two negatives make positive, right? A -3 times a -I, +3I. All right, now let's go with the -I portion of it. So -I times a -3, +3I. A -I times a -I, +I squared. Good. So I'm going to combine these right here. And then I'm going to also change the I squared into a what? A -1, right? So 9 plus 6I minus 1. Okay, because I squared is a -1. 9 minus 1 is 8. So I get 8 plus 6I. So my answer is A. All right. So the first half of your homework is this. You're going to be multiplying, just combining terms. That's it. Just combine terms. Take your time with it. Make sure you're looking for those I squareds and stuff like that. Okay. But I don't think it's going to be too bad. It's just like the stuff you did in the very beginning of the school year when I was giving you guys expressions and I tell you multiply them and combine them, right? Same idea, just that we're using I as our variable, right? Our imaginary value. Now, the rest of this has to do with graphing. Okay, they're going to say which one is the right graph. How do you graph this thing? How do you graph that thing? Okay, how do you graph a complex number? So right now I'm going to show you the standard way that you're going to see a complex number, and then I'll show you how easy it is to graph them, okay? The one main thing you're going to notice though, instead of x and y, you see how they call it the real axis and the imaginary axis? Okay, instead of x, y, they call it real and imaginary, okay? So remember that way it doesn't kind of confuse you a bit, but we'll talk about it right now. So here we go. How to graph a complex number. Again, this is really easy. Don't let it scare you, okay? This is really easy. So check it out. A complex number usually looks like this. It's either a plus bi or a minus bi. So I'm just going to write a plus or minus bi. Okay, it doesn't matter which one it is. Now, when they want you to graph it, all you have to do is get your a term and your b term and pretend that they're x's and y's. Okay, they're very similar to x, y. Your a is your x and your b is your y term. Just that they don't call it the x term and the y term. They call it the real and the imaginary. That's your x is your real and your y is an imaginary. Why? Because that's the way they label it on the graphs, right? I told you guys they do the real for the x's, imaginary for the y's, right? So they just call it the real and imaginary, but just treat it like any other point. So if I were to give you 2 minus 3i, then the point you need to graph is 2, -3. And I know you guys can graph 2, -3. That's just putting it on a graph. Go 2 to the right, 3 down, boom, put your dot, and you're done. That's it. Okay? It's not hard. Brenda will do some, but if I give you like a -4, well, here's one that might be a little tricky maybe. What should my point be for this? So say a little bit louder. What's my x value? -4. And what's my y value? -1. That's the little tricky part, right? Because I actually didn't label anything. What if I gave you, like, let's say a 6 plus 4i? What is that point? Say it louder. 6, 4. Thank you. Okay. Does that seem hard to do? Just AB. That's all you're putting. AB. Okay. Into that little point. So how do you graph it? Let's graph all 3 of these in one place. Here we go. Actually, yeah, I guess we could do it. All 3 in one place. So here we go. I'm going to make a chart, a grid really quick, okay? So I got to make sure I have all these. And guys, this is no different than any other graph that you've done. So if I wanted to plot a 2, -3, I would just go to 2 this way, right? I'm going to go 2 that way and 3 down, right? That's the -3. I would put the dot right there. 2, -3. There it is. And that's it. That's how you plot these. Okay? That's how you plot those. Now remember, this is called the real, this is called the imaginary axis, okay? So the real axis and the imaginary axis. The only difference is they don't like calling them x, y's. They want to call them real and imaginary because that's the components. The real component, the imaginary component. Now, if I graph the next one, -4, -1, bless you, I'm just going to go 4 to the left and 1 down. Here it is. I'm going to put a little dot right there. That way you guys know which one I'm putting in what place. Okay. But notice -4, -1. That's it. Again, you guys have done this before many times when you were graphing just points. So I don't think this is a really big deal. 6, 4. To do 6, 4, I'm going to use the purple dot for that one. I'm going to go 6 units to the right, 4 units up. There it is. Okay, so here's the challenge question. The last 2 questions they're going to give you on your homework. They're going to do something like this. That black one. Can you write that black one in its standard form, the a plus bi or a minus bi? Okay, so the first thing you want to do, so they're telling you go from your point backwards, right? That's basically what they're saying. So the first thing you want to do is identify the black point. So where is that black point? What are the coordinates for the black point? And 4, right? All right, so -2, 4. Now let's write it. So remember, the first number is the A, the second number is the B. So we're going to write it like this, okay? A plus or minus bi, okay? So according to that, I'm going to write -2 plus 4i. And that would be my answer for that point right there. That point is -2 plus 4i. Okay, let's try one more. What about this black point right here? Try it on your own right now. See if somebody can give it to me, okay? But write it down as a point first, and then give it to me as a standard form. So just do that really quick right now. I'll ask to see if someone can help me with that. Can someone give me the point for that black one in quadrant 4? What is that the coordinates for that black one? All right, 3, -1. Thank you. So 3, -1. Can someone else tell me how it's supposed to look like if I write it as a plus or minus bi? 3 minus I. Good. 3 minus I. That is the correct answer. And that's it. This is what your homework is like, guys. All right, so I'll stop the video right now.